So welcome back to the Long Way Back podcast. I'm Timmy Long, your host today with Donald Clifford.
Hi Tim.
Donny, how are you?
I'm good. Nervous again.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that either. I was nervous probably for everyone and still am.
Yeah.
But it's part of it, isn't it? So today we have a very special guest from all the way from California, Susan Olesek. Did I pronounce that right, Susan?
I think so. I was trying to figure out if it's the accent or something else. I say Olesek. Olesek.
And we were talking about accents today. We were saying the Jamaican people probably have the same accent as the Cork people. But Susan, just before we start, I'll just give you a brief description and you can follow on then. So Susan, you're from California. You work around the Enneagram. Yeah. Program. You work within prisons with the program. You also have another organisation. We'll get into a little bit more. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from and what you're doing?
Sure. I think the first thing I'll say is I'm a mom.
Okay.
I have 3 beautiful sons with my husband, and I think it's the proudest thing I've ever done. And I also work with the Enneagram, which I hope we'll talk a lot about. The Enneagram is a psychological tool, helps us to understand not just what we do, but why. And I founded an organization called the Enneagram Prison Project. And I live in California, so I'm based out of there, but we really have no brick and mortar building, no cool studio like you do with your logo on it. And we teach self-awareness to people who are residing inside prisons all around the world. And my heart is 1,000 feet deep in that work.
And what's your own story? Like growing up, were you brought up in California? Is that where you...
No. I grew up in just outside of Boston.
Okay.
Yeah, and I lived there until I moved around a little bit, but I think an important part of my story, and I just got to hear so much of yours today and then through your own work, Timmy, on the podcast, is I had the kind of mom that everybody wished they had. I think the one that I aspire to be. And if you came to our house for dinner, the story was you better bring it, because my mother would be up to her knees in the back in the mud with us doing whatever. And but we moved and we moved again, and we ended up in a house. And 2 weeks into that, we were having dinner, and my father went down to his workshop. We couldn't find my mom, and she had hung herself.
Okay.
And that's the beginning of really going upside down. 5.
You were 5.
Yeah.
And how many brothers and sisters did you?
I'm the youngest of 4.
You're the youngest.
So 5, 6, 7, and 9 at the time.
Okay.
And we can talk about that. I can talk about that today. But for a long time, I didn't understand what that did to me. And I think we said this today in OA too, to me, that it's the wound I came in with. I think I know everybody inevitably has something they come in with, and that was mine. And no one knew what to do with that. My dad didn't know what to do with that. So we didn't go back to that house. We didn't, no one knew how to talk about it. My dad left for a while to grieve. I stayed with people. I had a lot of people that loved me and people that did things right. But there were a lot of things people didn't know what to do, including me. And so we just coped. My dad is a survivor and a doer, and he came back when he had enough ground underneath him, and he didn't go far. He just needed. I mean, how does one deal with that? How do you process that? One story I like is his siblings sort of surrounded him, and he took his newspaper and he tore the real estate section up into sections and said, "Help me find a house." So he knew how to ask for what he needed, and we were a priority for him. And then we did find a house in a great neighborhood. We were the house to be at because we had no parents at home. And it was chaos. There was a lot of chaos. My dad drank. Our neighbors across the street said at one point there was trash blowing around the yard. I think there was just a lot of neglect, and not out of not loving us, but not out of not knowing how to really cope. But I think we coped in doing. My dad always had a project for us, and he would, it wouldn't be uncommon to find a $20 bill stapled to a list on the refrigerator, like go buy milk, buy this, do this, dig a ditch in the backyard, just things. And that's how we healed, and that's how we moved on.
How does a 5-year-old cope with something like that? Yeah, losing their mother. No, I've lost my own mother, but later on in life. But how does a 5-year-old child cope with that? How do the adults around that child explain what has happened to a child? Can you remember that far back?
I can a little bit. That's such a good question. How indeed?
Yeah.
I know a lot now about what I think psychologically people do. I'm trying not to answer from there. But I think the biggest thing was that I made up some narratives about it must be because of something about me. I think that's what kids do. And so I was always a very helpful, do-gooding kind of kid, and I just did a lot more of that. I tried to not be in the way. I tried to be happy. I really tried to stay connected to my dad, and I tried to not be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I followed the rules, and now I know through the Enneagram that that's a lot about my personality, and I know that personality is a strategy. And my parents didn't have the answers. My mother didn't leave a note. It was a bit of a mystery. Everyone filled in with a romantic version of who she was, which in some ways didn't help, because my story was that it must have been because of me, and everybody else's story was that she was amazing. And so then it just confirmed it for me that it must have been me. And
that is how a child internalises, don't it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I suppose they're narcissistic by nature, really, aren't they, children? Everything is about them.
Yeah, and we need our parents. I needed to know that I was connected to her, and so I think the way I stayed connected to her was to stay in compliance with that story, that narrative. And my father has a different personality, different strategy, and we can talk about that too. But he didn't, he couldn't comprehend it, and so he couldn't accept it. And he said, I think to protect us, to protect me, just tell people she died in a car accident so that you don't have to get into that. And that, I know that came from a good place or an intentional, helpful place, but what it did was make me believe that it was just so shameful that I should lie about it. And so all those things, I think, compounded.
So how did it affect you going forward with the rest of your life in relation to your relationships with other people, even with yourself, or your own relationship with yourself, which is most important than anything else? How did it affect you? Like, if you had that belief, was it because of me at the age of 5 over something like that? I can relate in different ways, because of different stuff. Not so much a debt, but different ways. And a little bit about my story and how things transpired afterwards. I went down the completely wrong road. Did you have people around you to be able to guide you?
Well, I did. I had an aunt, my dad's sister, who he flew to Atlanta. We were living outside of Boston, and he drove from Atlanta back to Boston, which is not a quick trip, in her little Fiat. And she moved in with us, and she didn't have to do that. She turned her life upside down. And that was an act of love, and she became a mother figure. I had lots of mother figures. Everyone went up on a pedestal, and frankly, everyone fell off. Because that's how it goes.
That's what happens with pedestals, isn't it? Yeah. So
I'm still in the business of pedestal making, but I feel like I'm onto that. And I had my siblings, and we became like a unit. I felt like they were really a part of me. And I think that was how I found safety. And we took care of each other. My dad was single for a long while, and I went to them for help with my math. We all made dinner. We were very, very self-sufficient. And so at too young an age. I was in charge of dinner too, because my sister was no dummy. She wasn't going to do it all. She was only 9 herself. So on my night, we take something out of the freezer and then throw it in the dinner in the oven, watch hours of TV. Someone would say, "What's burning?" That was my dinner, things like that. Not very good. But
that sounds like me.
Does it sound like you? So what's happening tonight to me?
Yeah.
Oh God.
How many siblings? Where did
3.
you come? 3 siblings. You were youngest?
I'm the youngest of 4.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your oldest sibling was?
My oldest is my sister, and then 2 brothers, and then me. And I have to say, we had a bit of pride about that for a long time. I like to tell you the stories about how we managed and how we survived, and what I did on my own. And I think a lot of that went to my resilience. And we were talking about this today too, that my dad gave us a purpose every day. We always had something that we were responsible for doing. And he wasn't a gentle critic. If you didn't get it done, you'd hear about it. So we just never didn't do it. We always got it done. And I think those things really, those were essential parts of how we healed. And the other side of that, because I learned that just having that happy narrative wasn't true, wasn't just that my siblings were siblings. They were kids who lost their mother, and they were in trauma, and it wasn't their job to know how to nurture me. So we just, were siblings with each other. And the dinner conversation was not at the lowest common denominator. It wasn't in a way that I could understand it. So I filled in with a really stupid narrative that I really felt like I never knew. And I always was trying really hard to keep up. And I never felt very quick or quick enough. And it wasn't like anyone was trying to reinforce that, but that's what I made up as a result.
Yeah. Can you say that part again? I just lost you there.
I don't know if I followed your thread exactly, but one of the things that I did was sort of fill in with a really stupid story about myself.
Okay.
Yeah, that can happen.
That happens. Yeah.
And that story then becomes the story.
Yeah. And I'm still looking for evidence about that one every once in a while.
Yeah. I think we always will.
Yeah.
I think it's just being educated around it is the key. It's knowing what the story is and knowing that it will be there, even though it's not true. I know.
But I think you can change the story as an adult if you kind of have that kind of reflective piece in yourself. Like we all come up with stories as kids, but it's having that awareness as an adult where you can kind of check it and go, oh yeah, I can see the benefit of it as a child,
right,
but maybe not as an adult.
Right.
I
totally agree. And I think that we're always drawing close to the familiar, to what we know, so that we can feel that same comfort. And so I married someone who is very much like my siblings, and he fit right in. And I'm still married to him for 27 years. And I remember at my wedding. I can see
why. I met him today, and he's a really nice man.
He's a good one.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of work together. But I remember at our wedding, my sister's toast was to Rick, "You're more a Coleman than any of the rest of us," or as much a Coleman as the rest of us. And I loved that so much because I felt like he was really in, and it took me a
Coleman was your second name?
That's my first name.
That's an Irish second name.
I was wondering.
That is Coleman.
I don't have quite as much gray as my brother. He's all white. He really looks the part. His middle name is Hoyle. Yeah. Hoyle. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I was wondering the Boston connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Susan as well is
Irish.
It's Irish. Yeah. Susan.
Yeah. So I just
Susan Coleman
got some cred here, did I?
Yeah.
100%.
I should have led with it.
Welcome home, Susan.
Just went.
Well, we already liked each other.
So you gave us a little bit of a description of your young life, and it must have been difficult, but you had your family around you, your siblings, and the way you had, and I was the same pretty much with Tommy and John Paul growing up. We had each other, but we still had a lot of different stuff going on in our lives. But we got by, school wasn't something for me. Did you get through school? Did you go into college?
I did get through school. I struggled. I'm not an academic. I'm always very quick to tell you that. I already told you my narrative. And I remember trying to learn maths and didn't get it. And from kindergarten, first grade, I remember looking for help. I remember getting in trouble for cheating off my friend because I couldn't afford to not be the good kid and get the good grade. And I didn't want anybody to know. And I think if my family heard this podcast, they would be surprised to know that I was caught cheating in third grade.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah. I would caught cheating every single day. Yeah. I used to move my chair closer. And the fella, I'd be trying to get closer to him and probably moving away at me because they smell all. No, but that was just how it was. Like, I think after a while, the teachers started to stop maybe asking questions because they knew that it was causing probably more damage than good to me. So some kids who knew the answers, it would boost their confidence.
Right.
But when you have kids who don't understand what's even going on, it just kind of destroys them a little bit more.
Chips away, like.
I think we know more today across the board, don't we?
A lot of people do. I think they're starting to understand children and kind of have a bit more awareness. And there's a big drive on at the moment for kind of this kind of trauma-informed approach of people that, like, you do, like shaming a child, because we know children can dissociate. And a child might actually know the answers, but when they're put on the spot, the answer, it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's like, I don't even know where I am.
Right.
And I can still know the stuff. And like a lot of kids do well in college. Like I did very well in college, I think. But in school, nothing. But I was left up and I was encouraged in college, and I had great people around me in college. So, but in school then it's like, I struggled. But I think a lot of kids just been put on the spot, and they can write about it and they could talk to their friends about it. But the teacher asking them then, it's like, and if they have something about, can I do this? It's a dissociation. Then it's just a drawing a blank. And
and then the story becomes bigger and bigger.
Exactly.
That's what happened
and
for
a
me.
self-belief then. No, I don't know my stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
I had a pretty good cover, for better or for worse, and so I kept getting by. And there are always subjects that I didn't do well in, and I did do well in writing and the arts and things like that. My whole family are engineers, and I married an engineer, of course. And so I just found my way of being a little bit out that way, and I think that's what gave me some reassurance that there were some subjects that could carry me, and I did. I went all the way through college, and but I've never been a reader, and I like to write, but I hear writers are good readers, and then that stresses me. But I have Audible, so I can listen to books, and I can read, but I don't retain, and so I've always just dealt with those things, but I don't talk about it a lot. So I think it's really nice to be in a safe space where that's an easy question.
Do you think that's tough for people? Like, I'm pretty much the same. I don't like to read, but there's some things that I really want to do in life, but it involves a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Like the masters I'm doing at the moment, there's a lot of books that need to be read to be able to understand the content, and that kind of gives me a small bit of anxiety. Yeah. Because I have to sit down and read. But then that's stopping me kind of from really doing something that I really am passionate about. And I did read somewhere that in some places where you have people with different learning differences and stuff like that, the colleges will tweak the whole course and make it practical for them. So instead of them having to learn from a book, what they'll do is they'll go with an experienced mindfulness teacher, and they will shoulder them for maybe 10 MBSR programs where they'll sit in and they'll take their own notes of what they should be doing and listen to the meditations and look at the structure and the guidance instead of having to read it and trying to do it yourself on the book.
I love that.
When you're emotionally connected to the experience like that, it just goes in.
Yes.
It's like me being a carpenter. I went to college, I struggled to get the qualification because of my academic ability, but when I was on site and I was showing something once, I was showing it and I was going away and I was doing whatever I needed to do. So it's so different, and I do love the thought that we are bringing in ways that people who do love and are passionate about different things in life, they don't actually have to do the academic route. They can go a practical route. And I know the Mindfulness Association of Ireland they have a course that's academic, like the one I'm doing in UCC, but they also have a shouldering one then, whereas kind of more you're like an
Hands-on,
apprentice,
yeah.
and you're sitting in the program. So I think it's fascinating.
I think it makes total sense. You're a kinesthetic learner. You learn through your body. Then your body remembers, and your heart remembers. Right? When you connect with it, you touched your heart. Then it all flows from there. And for me, I'm definitely an auditory learner. I love podcasts. I love Audible. I love to understand it. And if I can say it back to you, then I really feel like I've got it. And that's the thing I think I love so much about the Enneagram, is that it doesn't change. And people can be all kinds of different, but the structure of the system doesn't change. And that has been the one thing that it was really difficult for me to learn the Enneagram. And when I certified to become an Enneagram teacher, I felt like I passed the flipping bar. I felt like, look at me. And it is very difficult work. And even for the requirements that I had, I did 3 times what I had to do because I didn't feel like I had it. Some of that is because it's hard, and some of that is my personality that overdoes.
I can relate to that. What about you, Donny? That kind 100%. Of overdoing stuff. Like, even though you want to make sure by doing it again and again and again.
Right.
It's like when I put a bolt into a piece of timber. Like, the one bolt will hold a piece of timber, but I'll probably put 5 in just to
and then he'll charge
to make sure.
Charge you extra for every bolt after.
It just has to be done properly.
So is it about getting right, or is it about making it secure? What's it about?
It's about making sure that I don't get called back.
Oh, okay. You don't want to be in trouble.
But I also like doing the job properly.
Yeah.
I don't like walking away from some. Yeah. Like, if something's not done properly and the corner is right, and I know that it's safe, I have to.
Or doing it to my very best.
That's
one for me. Is just doing it to my very best. Like, I'm not half doing something. Or
it's key.
Yeah, it is. Like,
it's key, and you can walk away then with a bit of comfort,
a peace of mind, knowing I've given it my best. Like.
Right.
Yeah. So, Susan, let's get to the Enneagram. So when did this work start coming into your life, and how did it happen?
Well, like I said, I really was determined to be a great mother. And I'm the kind of personality that feels like I'm never going to be a great enough anything. And so when I had my first son, he was 6 months or so. I think I met someone who introduced me to someone, and by the time he was 2, I think, I put myself into a parenting class, and she had just become an Enneagram teacher herself, and she was weaving the Enneagram into the parenting work that she taught us. And my oldest is now turning 27, and so it's been all those years. And
you've learned so much.
Well, I took the Enneagram. I took the parenting class because I wanted to make sure I was going to be a good mom, and the truth was I already was one. I just didn't know that, and I thought that learning the Enneagram about my kids would help me to understand them. But what I failed to know is that I had to do some re-parenting of myself. And that was the beginning of the beginning.
That's what I was going to say. Was there just a lack of confidence in your own ability? Yeah.
I think it just went to that same story. If I didn't know math, I didn't know this. I didn't know what I didn't know about being a good mother, and I didn't trust my instincts. And actually, I have very good instincts. And I think there's 3 different ways of learning. If you look at the Enneagram, one of them is through the head, one of them is through the heart, and one of them is through the gut. And my type learns instinctually, and
through the gut.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are the types? There's 9 types in the Enneagram.
Yep. We'll get it by the end.
I'll get it. Enneagram. Definitely. I'll probably say it 100 times during this podcast, and I probably will just get it right at the last one.
No, you've already gotten it right. So
there's some words I'm trying to still spell for the last, 12 years.
Well, the Enneagram is spelled Ennea, and Ennea means 9 in Greek.
Enneagram.
Yeah, and gram just means picture or diagram.
Enneagram.
You literally pronounce it the way it looks. It's one of those words that are rare that way. And there are 9 types. And the Enneagram is a psychological tool, and it's actually a system. So it helps to identify the repeating patterns that we have inside of ourselves, the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave. So those things, we put them all together, and we call that personality. Yeah. So you know already these personalities, and you probably have experienced all of them throughout your whole life without having these numbers attached to them. Different schools use different words. I'm not attached really to the labels, but they can be a useful shortcut. I think the important thing to know is that each one of the personalities is a strategy that, and the strategy comes from childhood. That the basic building blocks of personality happen from very, very early on. And so I would talk about the types. So I'd like to just first explain how I think we form a personality, because I think that's a helpful framework.
Definitely,
Yeah.
Definitely.
That people often ask, well, is it nature or is it nurture? And I think it's both.
Both, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So far, we have had no disagreements. This is going very well.
No, it's adding up here.
And the nature part is that we come essentially good and beautiful and whole and
complete.
Complete. And
the organism itself.
That's right.
Just whole. That's it.
I think we all at this table and maybe in this room believe that.
Yeah.
We believe that we're all born perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have a baby to know that, but I know you have 3. Do you have children?
2.
You have two
beautiful
you have
daughters.
2. Yeah.
Just say 2, because if my wife was watching this, she'll think there's another one out there.
We can edit that part out, Nicole.
So it's 2.
Yeah.
I have 2. No, you can keep that in.
Let the record show.
And a dog.
Oh, yeah, well, if you come to dog, that's 3.
Don't get me in trouble by thinking I put your dog with your children. I'm not doing that.
Oh, very good.
But if you don't have children and you've ever been in the grocery store and you see a baby in the cart, you can tell. I mean, babies just come wide open and they don't come doing all that strange stuff that we do. We learn how to do that. But even as I say that, if you have a supported, if a mother has a supported pregnancy, then the child comes out that way. But if the mother's not supported, then the child's already a step down, from all of that. Not that they're any different, but that they have already had some conditioning that they didn't get at the same start. So, but Jen, for the sake of what we're talking about, babies come ready to love and be loved. I think we can agree there.
Yeah.
And that's the nature. And the other part of the nature is what we call the temperament, that inborn animal nature. And, some types are just naturally assertive. You have any of those children? You have one of those?
Oh, yeah.
You might not. There's 3 different temperaments, I would say. Well, there's not many different temperaments, but I'll put them in these categories. So one type is very assertive and become aggressive if they don't get what they want. And one type is more withdrawn. It's a step back. And that's part of their how they're organized. And then there's another type that's sort of in the middle, more compliant or dutiful. And so that's part of the nature. And that temperament is a way of wanting to express what the book that I love to use is The Wisdom of the Enneagram. That's the text that I use in prison and corporations and everywhere else. And they call it a divine spark. And I love that. So I think that every child, when you see a little baby and they just have all that light is their divine spark. And in our temperament, we're just trying to express whatever that is, our essential quality. And then we meet our parents.
And our community and...
Yeah, but first the parent, always the parent first. And even if you don't meet your birth biological parents, or even if you're raised by somebody that's not your mom or dad, we have an attachment relationship with our primary caretaker and our protective figure. And if one of them sees us as we really are, then our essential quality, we just do that more because it's safe for us to be who we are. And if we don't, then we start to kind of contract against our true nature, our essential quality, and we close our hearts because it doesn't feel safe or we don't feel connected. And when we shut down like that, we still have to get by. We still have to go on and live our life. And so...
That's a great explanation.
Yeah.
I've never heard it explained like that before. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I was taught these parts by all my teachers, and I didn't understand that. I innately didn't understand that. And I for sure was never taught that in school. And when we contract like that, we kind of remember the essence of who we are, but we can't contact it in ourselves because our hearts are shut down. So we sort of imitate that essence, or the mimicry of our essential divine spark is the ego. That's the beginning of personality. It's like an echo. One of my teachers, Russ Hudson, says, an echo of something good. And that's what I see in prison. echo of something good. And so then the imitation of who we are starts to be a strategy, because it's a little bit like we are, and we're kind of good at it because essentially we're beautiful at one thing. And it gets reinforced because it works. And so we keep doing it, and we do it and do it and do it. And so then when you think about conditioning, and we all could talk a lot about this, I think, that the conditioning is a sort of like a degree of how much we've needed to do that version of ourselves and not come from who we really are. So if I have a really terrible, full of adversity childhood, then and a lot of trauma, and it's not safe for me all the places to be who I am. I'm going to come with a lot of imitations of myself. I'm not going to let anybody see who I really am. And there's 9 versions of that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect sense. Yeah. Perfect sense. Can I ask you a question?
Anything.
I suppose what I meet a lot of is people questioning why certain people, and even when I met you there, I was like, how did you get involved in the work that you got involved in? Because like you were saying, no addiction in your history of personally. I'm wondering how does somebody end up in that type of work, working with these type of people, coming from the background you've come from? Have you been able to join up your own life experience with what you do now for your life, and kind of how much you've dedicated to the Enneagram?
The first time doing
Nicely done.
I've written all of it.
He was practicing that. He was practicing that in his head there for the last 20 years. Yeah.
Have you been able to join up those pieces?
I think so.
I heard you saying at the very beginning that it was kind of the chaos in the house.
Yeah.
And my experience of kind of prison, and I work with people coming out of prison, and I also work with people like you. Kind of, you'd have to question why do they do this type of work? That it's heavy lifting. It's not for the faint-hearted. Like, have you been able to kind of join up those pieces? Could you talk just a small bit about that for us, if you don't mind?
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
It's a good question.
It's a great one. Well, a couple things. I've always been a lover of people, always. If I was on a plane when this happened many times, if I was on a plane when I was 13 and my dad was in some other section and we didn't get seats together, I'd have already become friends and know everything about the person next to me by the time he collected me up and moved me to the rest of where everybody else was. We didn't fly a lot in the beginning. So I've always just really found people fascinating. I love them. And I have a lot of innate instinctual understanding of how people are. I'm a good listener because I like to listen, and I'm very intent in understanding people. And I've always been. And so, and that wound that I came in with really did turn my world upside down, and it really did create a lot of chaos. And this is related to my own Enneagram type. Mm-hmm. So I lead with type 1. I like to say I work with type 1 because we aren't really our personality, but we do have to work with it. Mm-hmm. And part of us is that, but it's not the whole of us. Mm-hmm. And remember I talked about that divine spark. The essential quality for type 1 is goodness. One's come to teach the rest of us about goodness. And Gandhi wasn't in my class, but I believe Gandhi was a 1. And, Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. Yeah. Like that. Yeah. And I think that at my essence, when I'm at my best, that's who I am. And that's what I'm on the planet for. And I've always known that. When I was younger, I had a hard time really believing, understanding, remembering that. But the more work I do, and in crowds like this, I'm sure that's what I'm on the planet for. And the young one, the young one gets the idea that it's not okay to make mistakes. And I really got that idea. And I felt like anything I did could be a mistake and could jeopardize my relationships, could jeopardize my dad loving me. I mean, I could take it really far, really quickly. And what we really can't stand, I think what I'll say is we call type 1 the idealist, and one see how the world could be like Gandhi. And I really, the first time I stepped into prison, everything in me was like, not like this. This is not how we heal. And I had no business saying that. I don't know anything about prison. I'd never been to prison before. but I knew, and that's what I'm talking about. So the essence of me says, I have some like a know, I know that I know that I know inside of my heart how things could be, and I can feel it when they're not that way, and that breaks my heart. And so that kind of contraction, I think whenever there's chaos, it really can trigger that for me. And my whole childhood was very chaotic for a long time. And so I can see my own personality. We all need some sort of setup to come into the world and to become who we're going to be. I heard you say many times today, I'm grateful for my life to me. You said that. Yeah. And I'm grateful for that because I know that part of why I'm here is to bring this tool to everyone, because it's always been meant for everyone. And I wouldn't be able to do that with any credibility if I hadn't suffered and if I didn't know pain, and I do.
You do. Yeah. I think it's important for people that maybe just to understand that people have had life experience that brings them to do the work that you do.
Yeah.
It isn't like everything was rosy and you just decided,
no,
I'll go into prisons.
Yeah.
And
life is too good.
I actually always open with it because I don't have anything else like the people that I'm coming in to serve and guide. I don't have anything comparable. I know that. And I don't want to bullshit anybody. I just want to be able to come in and be real. Yeah. And I think it gives people a lot of credit. It gives me credibility. It
does. Yeah, it definitely does. When you hear it, when you kind of hear more of a whole life story. Yeah. And I think what we kind of get used to really is, especially in Ireland, we get used to very short kind of synopsis of addiction and maybe prison, and it's very short. Whereas like you have to take in the person's whole life from birth, even pre-birth, up to what has happened to them today. But even in the justice system here, it's very much condensed into, you became an addict and you did these things, and that becomes the whole story, But
that's
it's
your
good.
Identity.
That becomes your identity. Yeah, there's no kind of escaping that. Whereas you gave us a great example of something happened when you were very, very young, and innocent and vulnerable, and this kind of changed. And it happens to everyone. There's something happens at a very young age that kind of changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. But we go different ways.
Yeah.
There's so many roads. So when you're born, it's like here, you're born, everything is perfect. But there's hundreds and thousands of different roads going this way and that way and back that way. And all those roads are dictated on the environment you're going out to, the people that you're going to be influenced with, the culture, the family dynamics, the intergenerational trauma, all these different things. So there's so much. And we had a fantastic conversation about this stuff today. And Marie, who's in the room as well today, we were talking about getting to know somebody before we actually judge them.
Right.
Get to know their what you were saying, their history.
Their history, their full history.
What actually fucking happened to them.
Right.
Why are these things happening in your life? Why are you doing these? And do you know, when I hear the word choice from people, it pisses me off. Because people think that it's a choice.
Right. Well, this is an interesting segue, because I think when we talk about personality, it is our first addiction. And this is what we teach in the prisons and jails and Google and all the rest, right? Because it's the same curriculum, same people. That what we do, that temperament, right? That patterned, that behavior that we talked about in the formation of personality, it takes the edge off because it's something that we know, and so we do it. So for me and for type 1, the habit is to see how things could be, and then to feel the difference, and then to want to fix them, to want to bring things back into alignment. And so that can look like a lot of different things. It can look like reforming the criminal justice system, or it can look like making sure that all of my stuffed animals on my bed were meticulous, right? Because my addiction really was order, and I was fiercely addicted to that. And I think that when you look at each specific Enneagram type, there is something that's so patterned, you can predict it on the diagram. You can tell me what your type is, and I can tell you what your dopamine hit is. So for me, my dopamine hit is getting things in alignment. Now, as an adult, I've worked with that, and I can tolerate a lot more chaos. And I have a lot of chaos because I've raised 3 children. I've stayed married for 27 years. I run 2 organizations. I work in flipping prison. One of our core values is flexibility. Things never go as you think, right? And I'm good at working with chaos, and it's still my trigger. So in a way, I don't have an addiction, although I do think I probably have my first addiction is next to my personality is sugar. So I do think I have things that I still struggle with. And that way that we move in the world to trigger our brains to make that chemistry, the dopamine, the serotonin, the things that feel good inside of ourselves, that's all wired in very, very early on.
Deeply too.
Yeah.
You're talking about sugar there, even the way we're wired around sugar today.
And anything that makes us feel better.
Yeah.
If it's order, if that makes us feel better, if it's sport, if it's being competitive, sugar, like escapism, anything that's going to make you feel better.
Right.
That's what the dopamine hit is. It's that kind of, like, I want to feel better.
So it could be success, could be power, could be giving, could be loving, could be...
It could be
anything.
Anything. And it isn't just about dopamine either. It's about your psychology. And like, if I feel, some days I feel quite defeated, I need to kind of reflect on something, say, well, I did that well, or I did that well, and that's almost like a dopamine hit. Even though it's not really, it's not chemistry in your body, but
it's also healthy. It's also a healthy thing
100%.
because if you're not getting your dopamine hits from something like order or maybe structure, you're getting it from drink or drugs or gambling or some other way.
That's the logical sequence, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody just wants to feel loved. Yeah. Everybody wants to. My teacher, David Daniels, used to always say, just want to have a good life.
Yeah.
It's really not that simple.
That's it.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
And so we get hired for our personality. Personality is very useful, but it has its limitations. Yeah. And so we get hired for something and then we overdo it until people are ready to fire us. Knock it off. Can't you do anything else? And if we are really stuck in our one, if we think it's just this way and the world has to be this way, which is how ones can get stuck, then we really suffer. But if we can recognize, there's lots of different ways the world could be, the 2s have a different approach, the 8s have a different approach, and on, then we can relax.
Yeah. So you're a 1.
I do both. Yeah.
You're number 1 here.
Yes.
So number 1 is the reformer.
Yeah, the idealist.
Yeah, we also call it the idealist.
I done the test with you.
Yep.
And I also done it on my own. And there was a few things stuck out when we were together, and there was also as well when I done it on my own. But it came back to number 2. It was number 2, the helper.
Yeah.
You have the achiever, the individualist, the investigator, the loyalist, the enthusiast, the challenger, and the peacemaker.
That's right. And so what stuck out to you when you heard about type 2? Do you remember? We have the essential qualities. Let me just say them.
Yeah, like I was just looking at it here, and the helper, right? It's
the essential qualities that we really know about type 2 are love and sweetness.
There was, but I was also a little sad when I was looking at it, Susan, because there are some things like that have a massive effect in my life as well in relation to the people pleaser.
Yeah.
Never saying, always being the yes man instead of,
Yeah.
And it got me really, really thinking about my life, how particularly at the moment, because I'm going through so many different things within myself around what I want to do with the rest of my life. Where do I want to work? It's so difficult for me to make that decision because there's other things that are out of my control.
And your attention goes to like all the different people. Yeah. Is that it? All the different things that you could be doing?
Yeah, it's like I'm waiting for that voice to tell me, do you know what, Timmy, you should be doing this. Whereas I know that that's never going to happen.
Right.
I know it's what I'm happiest with.
Right.
But what I'm happiest with is something that I have to be reading academically.
Is that true?
Maybe a little bit. The academic reading kind of I do struggle with.
Can I just say what I just what I just witnessed is you said, you gestured out here for us, and then you said, but I know that it's in here, what I feel. And then you said this thing.
But then there's this block.
Yeah, then you make up this other story that it's this academic thing.
It's the academics, like the heart is there. This is what I'm good at. This is really something that I'm really good at. Without blowing my own trumpet, I understand how people can get well through mindfulness and how I can help them to create awareness.
Right.
And I love it, because when I see the change in people, it gives me a real sense of belonging and purpose.
It's effortless for you.
You know? And that's what I do love. But in order for me to become somebody that's in a position to put myself out there and get work in that area, I have to have this piece of paper.
Qualifications.
And that needs to be reading books. Now, I'd gladly read this book, but it'll probably go on the shelf like another 200 books at home.
But you also just gave us this beautiful description of what the workaround was with mindfulness, and that there's all kinds of things that come. So this is what I've had to keep surrendering to, is that I think I know, and really I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? As soon as I think that it has to be a certain way, then I'm attached to that, and then I start making it a certain way, and that's the problem.
That's when you lose it.
Yeah. And so actually there's something much bigger than me that's in charge, that I know. And you can call that whatever you want.
Yeah. We all have our own understanding of it because of our own experiences and how it worked for us. And we're can I just read out one or two things from type 2, the helper. Love is the admiration and cherishing of the admirable qualities of the beloved person upon the condition of yourself being the subject of their action. So these are just small quotes. Are they, Susan, from different people?
I think you're looking at on the margins, on the sides.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they might be just some quotes.
So you have the altruist, is it?
Altruist.
You have the lover. You have the caretaker.
Are you any of those?
I probably am.
Because here's the thing about type 2, like the essence of 2 though is, we can feel it. I'm sure you can feel it in the room. Is love.
Yeah.
That's it. You already showed us with your hand on your heart.
And I do get quite emotional, you know, but I can get really pissed off with people too when they hurt me.
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
When I have that built into me from my upbringing.
Well, here's something I'll say about that 3 of the types sit in one center of knowing, of intelligence, which we talked about, this instinctual center. And one of the most fundamental instincts is anger. Yeah. Anger is the thing that lets you know, is it right? Is it fair? Am I getting what I need? Am I getting what I want? And if the answer is no, you should hope you get angry. You're supposed to.
But it's the anger then, for me, you see, the way we dealt with anger growing up.
That's generally because you come from an angry
environment.
Yeah. So like the anger is explosive.
Yeah. It comes out explosively.
Right.
And it comes out very damaging to him.
And it can be damaging, because even though I'm out of prison, I had situations like where road rages came into my life, and it nearly brought me back to prison without drinking drugs in my life, you know, and I had to kind of pull back and say, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're doing all this work on yourself. But it's like when someone kind of puts me down or speaks badly to me, disrespects me, it brings me right back to that place I was in when I was a child, where I allowed people to do that.
Right.
But because I'm a man now and I'm an adult, it's like, how dare you? How dare you speak to me like this, sir? You know, and this comes out in anger, because the only way we dealt with anger when we were young was through violence, and expressing ourselves verbally and aggressively with our mouths, you know, with language. And I have learned to tame that stuff down. I am quite aware of that stuff today, and I can feel it in my body instead of starting to vomit from the mouth with stuff. This is
the beginning of so much, and even just the way that you're able to describe it, and the connections that you're making. And the first thing I want to just say that I think you know, but that everyone, we can all just nod and say that none of that is any of your fault. Like, how could you know differently if that's what the conditioning was that you received?
But we know it at this table, we know it. But when you go out there where people are just they live in their own bubble and they're not educated around this stuff. It's different.
Right.
And your choices in life and your kind of whole journey in life can be misdirected because of other people's power.
You can feel railroaded by it, really. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
No, I'm not going into it. I'm just saying this in a general aspect, not just for me.
Yeah.
For everybody that has had a background in prison or addiction or whatever, or just someone that has just been cancelled.
Right.
Because we live in a cancelling generation where you just cancelled like that. You know, because of social media and everything else. So
can I maybe contribute a small bit to that? And this is just my experience, and my experience of knowing Tim for a couple of years now at this stage, and kind of the learning I've taken from watching Tim kind of do his thing is, I think the part that you said, the love, whereas a lot of men wouldn't even talk about it, wouldn't understand it, don't want to know about it. But I think from as long as we've known each other, kind of a very healthy love has been expressed in a very safe, secure way. And my experience is when you can bring that in, automatically that anger and that rage that you were talking about, it's almost like automatically that gets dampened. And it just seems to be reduced, even though it's still there and it still gets triggered.
yeah.
And like from my experience, it takes somebody with huge bravery to be able to go and deal with that and talk about it. And I said that to you before, like I meet some men, and it's primarily men I work with, but they will come and they will talk about feeling love or wanting to feel love or feeling safe. Like for me, safety is primary in the setting in my own, I suppose in my own office. It's about somebody feeling safe and warm, and out of that grows the love. But it's maybe helping people to understand that if I introduce that, I don't have to be so much working on the anger. The anger kind of comes with it and is almost reduced. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Makes sense because of my own kind of relationship with, years and stuff. But,
and I think I want to also add that for your type in particular, for all the heart types 2, 3, and 4 together, what they have in common is having a sense that they weren't seen for who they truly were as children. And there's a profound sense of sadness and grief about that. So what you said earlier on is like, I do relate to this love thing, but there's this sad part about it. And when you receive this treatment. And so interestingly, underneath the sadness, there's a welling up of grief and shame, as though somehow it's about me. And so what the heart types have in common is trying to find a strategy to feel like I have a way of being connected. And when I sense that I'm not connected, when people don't see me or get me or know me or understand me, when they don't like me, and ultimately they don't love me, then I feel this really big trigger, similar to how in the body types, there's a trigger of anger when things are not in control. So we're doing the Enneagram in a very, step-by-step process, but the Enneagram is in a circle, meaning that we're all of it. So even though I am one type, I'm connected to all the types. Everything's connected.
They all kind of come into your life in some way or form.
Well, literally, we're all connected. Everything's connected. And until we think we're not, and then that's where we start to suffer.
If somebody is listening to this and they're really into what we're talking about, because I think it's fascinating, it really gives somebody a great understanding of how to look at themselves, and it directs them in the book here. Is there workshops that you can do with yourselves or anybody else?
Yes.
And they can be guided along this stuff? Because some people mightn't have the kind of emotional intelligence that we're talking about here, because they might be early on in a journey of recovery, mental health or addiction, and it can be a difficult road at the beginning because you're trying to figure out actually what's going on internally for you. But like what I've noticed around the book, and since I met you last year or the year before? Last year. I've gotten to know some of the different areas of the book, and it's very emotionally intelligent. There's a lot of stuff in there. But there are ways that someone can guide you through this.
Yeah, during the pandemic, when we couldn't program anywhere in custody, we developed a bunch of online programs that we offered to the public, which is essentially our in-custody program built for everyone else. And so the first introduction to our compassionate approach to the Enneagram, we called 9 Prisons, 1 Key. And it's a 8-week course that we have online. And then we have a follow-on program called The Path to Freedom. So the Path to Freedom is really the deep dive into what we do with the rest of the tool in jails and prisons. And that's to first understand how personality forms, some of which we already started to talk about, these 3 different centers of intelligence, but also our first addiction to personality and how when that's not working for us, then how we're set up to have addictions in substance or process or, other things. And also the importance of what happened to us, that none of what happened to us was our fault. So we look at adverse childhood experiences and then we unfold the rest of the Enneagram. It's a 14-week course. It's a lot of hours, and it's also on a learning management system. So there's a brief introduction, and then you can always go deeper with the Enneagram. And both of those courses are part of what our training is to become a guide in jails and prisons. But it's also just for people who want to heal and grow and want to understand why they do what they do. And we offer all those programs in a for-profit business that I have called the Human Potentialists.com, and you can find those courses there, and that is it's a beautiful way to just start understanding what the tool is about. All of our learning is in groups at the moment, where you can come into a cohort of other people. You have a guide and a co-pilot who's another person who learned the Enneagram while they were incarcerated, and they are part of your whole journey.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, it really is.
And even to get the lads from prisons involved in the program, I think that's powerful.
It's brilliant.
Who it's most, I don't know, we argue about who it's most powerful for, but in both directions, for people, mainstream people who have not had the benefit of being able to sit in our jail and prison classes, who get to sit next to somebody who's done 30 years inside hard time, who are sage guides actually in what the work is and what it means to be free. We have so many students who are free literally inside of themselves long before they're released. And so when they come into a cohort like that, it's magical, and the transformation is going back and forth.
And they're actually some ambassadors of your company as well.
That's right, yeah.
Which I think is powerful.
We call the people who learn the Enneagram on the inside and then came out and become exemplars and speakers for us and employees and teachers and guides themselves and sit on our boards. They are the real heart of our project. That it's so rare to do this work.
Can you explain to people, and this is just abroad, can you explain to people how giving somebody some responsibility, and because a lot I can imagine it's bad back here to get a job if you have criminal convictions with guard vetting and everything else, and I'd say it's probably worse in the States. Can you explain the gratitude that some of these lads have for you when you give them a job opportunity like that and then put them on the board? Because something like that happened to me with a different organisation, and it was like, whoa, I felt worthy. I felt worthy without actually even feeling worthy. I was still on my journey, but I felt like, whoa, somebody actually thinks I'm capable of doing something like this, and they believe in me, even though I didn't believe in myself.
Right.
The turnaround, I thought, was unbelievable for myself, to be given a bit of responsibility, and I would have done anything there for that person, because they actually gave me an opportunity.
They seen you.
They seen me doing it.
Yeah. Right.
Do the lads feel the same?
And you picked a really perfect word, I think, for that description, because as a twos are so good at noticing the worth of people around them. Twos are the nurturers and the healers on the planet. They're the people who let us know how to take care of each other and what other people don't have. They recognize that, and they see the worth in other people very altruistically and very selflessly. That's a healthy two. And so when somebody reflects that back to you with that gesture, they're recognizing, they're literally confirming this thing that you maybe have been on the fence about your whole life. And then you have an opportunity to believe them or not. And so I think I love how you described it, that something kind of wells up in you. I don't even know. I don't even recognize it.
I get emotional.
Yes.
I get really emotional when somebody does something like that.
That's your heart that knows.
Sometimes it can be very uncontrollable for me. And it's like, and even today, I don't know why today I'm a little bit emotional, to be honest with you. I don't know why. But like, I don't know, was it because of maybe going into a little bit of depth earlier on when we were talking? But I do actually question myself a lot about that really strong sense of emotion that comes up for me at times, because sometimes I have to stop myself from actually crying.
I kind of noticed it this evening.
Do you feel that?
Yeah. When I was listening to you and you telling your life, not about your work, but about your earlier life experiences.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what tapped into something
and
for me.
I felt it too. Yeah,
and also when you
start.
spoke about your husband, because I met him today and I could see how much of a good guy he is, like in chatty way, big man, big, like.
Oh, he'll love that.
If he had a lot of tattoos on him, and he was in and out of prison all his life, I'd be saying, stay the fuck away from that mad fucker, like. But he was really just sat in the car, down to earth, chat. Nice, I swear to fuck, I thought I'd known him all my life. We were chatting in the car. Right. Yeah. And it was like, whoa.
But I think we're starting to meet more and more people like yourself, who we just feel like I think my experience of it, we've met so many people that kind of, I suppose, were so guarded and kind of tense for so many years that it just never really felt safe. But I know in the last couple of years we're meeting a lot of people who are just genuine, warm, caring, safe, like these people, and more we do seem to be meeting more of them.
100%.
And that's a great experience then when you're coming from some place that's completely different.
Right.
Do you know, it's like, oh Jesus Christ, there's another one. Do you know, so we meet people like you and like, oh fuck, this is
like
great.
An invitation for you to be yourself even more.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel it the same.
What are these people doing around us? It's like, and we've often spoken about it, like the amount of people that we meet that are just, and they haven't come from the same backgrounds, but they treat us very well and respectful, and
they'll do anything for you.
Yeah, just amazing people.
Before when people would do something for me, you know, when I was in early recovery, it was like,
what do they want?
What the fuck do they want? Yeah. What does he want?
Yeah.
You know, like,
came with conditions.
Then, or else someone would be nice to me and they'd say, oh, geez, I'll be out to your house next week. They're like, being your gaff. I'll put on your roof. You know, it was like I had to give him something back. And he said, fuck me, I don't want nothing from you.
Right.
It's cool, man. Jesus Christ. Like.
And part of what you're talking about is actually that's the strategy of the two. Is that the child starts to, gets this idea that I'm not loved just for who I am. I'm only loved based on taking care of other people. But that's the particular narrative of the two. And that's the way you've spoken to me about what you get so tired of doing, right? So because it's not actually human to always be giving. It's human to be in what I call like a divine reciprocity, where I give to you and you give to me. And sometimes you give to me a lot and other times I give back to you, but there's an attunement that goes back and forth that's beautiful and knowing and loving and reciprocal. And twos for that, it just gets a little out of kilter, or it gets a lot out of kilter, because if I really believe I can have no needs and I'm always giving, then I also need to be repressing a lot of what I feel and stuffing those things down. So there's also a defense mechanism, although we all use all the defenses. There's one defense mechanism that's so particular that it makes the diagram. And for two, it's repression. And earlier we were talking about, you said I have this upwelling of sadness, and then I have anger. Well, I think if I push down my own needs long enough, then eventually I'm going to have a need, and I'm going to know exactly what I need and that it wasn't met, and I will become a very different looking personality for a minute. So the Enneagram accounts for that in a dynamic way that you start to really unpack the symbol. You see that type 2 is connected to one of the most assertive types on the Enneagram, and that's the 8, the protector, the boss, the disruptor. And 8s are great at making sure that they get what they need. But all of this is about different levels of awareness. And so if I'm a rather unaware whatever type, don't get what I need, I'm going to move along the diagram to the same level of health, of development. And over time, when I get healthier and healthier and healthier, then, like you're describing yourself to me, now I can recognize, like you said, so intelligently, it's in my body. You can start to recognize the body's signals, which is like a PhD. That's huge. So
you know, even what we're talking about here, we're on about how things can really change us in the program, the Enneagram. Now you're working in prison with lads, and they're doing the program with you in the prison. How has it transformed their lives? Like, say for example, you have this big man coming up there, in and out of the prison for the last 25 years. He's probably done 10 years now at this stage, full of tattoos. He comes up there and he's destroyed. He's completely closed up here. There's a load of armour stopping him, anybody from getting near his heart. Like, have you seen a man walk into the group and walk away after doing a program a completely different man? Has that happened? It happens a lot.
Countless. Yeah, countless.
Can you give us a story of maybe one?
I didn't think which story, but something that's just coming up as you're telling me was early on. When I didn't know anything about anything, I barely felt like I knew the Enneagram, but I ended up teaching in a prison, and I had a panel. We like to teach in the narrative tradition, so we put people who relate to the same type on a panel so that they illustrate in the questions that we ask them are about how they see the world, and then their point of view, what do you know, is very similar, even if they're very different in their life experiences, different gender, age, race, language, it doesn't matter. They say the same kinds of things, and that's how you can confirm the type, so that they look at each other going, oh, wow, that's like, these are my people, and the people that are trying to learn say, oh my goodness, they really think the world works that way. So I was with a panel of 8 eights. So for the record, it's a lot of energy. 8s are the most assertive type I was describing. Yeah. And too many of any type, I think, because it's hard to spend enough time with one. But this one man, and I was so green, I remember it. I asked him about what gave you the idea that you had to be strong to survive. And this man was probably as big as Rick, and like a wall, very young, maybe he was 26, maybe. And like a very chiseled, like a wall. And without flinching or looking away, he said, well, when I was 2, my father tried to kill me. And what do you say to that? And I don't know what I said. I'm sure I said something compassionate. And but I don't think I said it very fluently, and it didn't matter because I said what was in me. But afterwards, and there were about 100 men in blue, all wearing blue after this class, and they were standing around after, and it was a long day. It was 2 days for the entire Enneagram, so it was pretty intense. And anyway, I found him, and this man was so compelling to me, and I can't tell you why. But I was glad that I recognized him, because it was hard to find people after we took a break. And I walked up to him and I said, what you said really, really touched me. And I could feel your heart, and I could just feel how vulnerable you were. And his eyes filled up with tears, just like that. And I think that's the way it is, that it doesn't take very much to be seen for who we really are, if it's real and if it's true, for the heart to open. Yeah. It just takes a moment. And he didn't know me. And I could just feel him, and he and then my eyes filled up with tears. And we're in a prison. Yeah. And he said, just like an 8 would do, the 8's the challenger. And so he said, what are your tears about? And I said, well, you remind me of my little boy, because he did. And my little boy is an 8. And we just shared a moment like that. Now, he's not somebody that became an ambassador. I actually lost contact with that program. It's a long story. But I felt in that moment that's what change is. It's just like you said, being seen and being received as we are, without judgment. And that's the ticket. And how often do any of us see any of us like that? Not often enough.
And that's what changes people.
Right.
Isn't it, just being seen how you are? And I love what you said at the start. and it's still in my mind. You said, you have to allow the child to be what they're being. If you stop them, if you stop them on their tracks from becoming who they are supposed to be by expressing themselves, because you might be an adult that doesn't like the way that they're expressing themselves. Maybe a little boy being a little bit feminine, but if he's expressing it in that way, how do you stop it? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
This is just an example, but mine would have been a lot different in a different way. It would have been like, I would have been probably, I don't know, probably a little bit hyper with the ADHD maybe, but
there's so many ways in our culture we reinforce, like you said, men are not affirmed to be in their hearts, right? To be just open-hearted, and you can just be. I remember my brother, who's bigger than Rick, when he was 12, running downstairs to give my dad a kiss when he came home from work. And one day, and I remember my dad kind of greeting him with a handshake, and I just observed, like, oh, that was a moment where my dad was like helping my brother to be more in line with what it is to be a teenage boy. And even though I was younger than my brother, I recognized that contraction in the heart. And so I think it's really important to say that you don't have to have a shitty childhood to have personality. Any old little moment of not being seen will do. And if you have profound dysfunction, then you will have a lot more personality armoring you up, because you need it to survive. And then it takes a lot of courage to pull back the layers and see, well, what's in there? And what are all the things that happened that caused me to contract like that?
Yeah,
that's an important piece, because people are always looking for the big significant issues, the huge traumas that have changed them. That piece now that's key. That'll be key for a lot of men.
Yeah.
A lot of young men who are kind of given this message and thought this kind of way of being. So anybody out there, I suppose, who's listening, my take on it is, look for those little nuggets.
Yes.
Those nuggets that shaped you, that told you what you were to be this way, or you were this way and you couldn't be this way. Or it's those small pieces. We're all looking for these big, huge traumas, like our lives were a total car crash, and it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be.
Like, a lot of these little things kind of get you thinking about how was I shaped, you know? And even for people with huge traumas, there's the little nuggets as well.
Right.
Those little pieces, like putting out your hand when we know every little boy and every grown man wants to feel the same love. You know, someone putting out their handshake when really you want to hug.
Right.
And
how innocent that was for my dad too. My goodness, he's just,
and
you know,
lost.
Well, and isn't it inevitable that we're all going to grow up, right? And we're all just a product of our conditioning. So, like, can't we just all be easy with it? Like, we were laughing at this at lunch too. Like, my goodness, the stuff we know now as parents who study mindfulness and how to be aware of personality and all these things. My dad didn't have anybody telling him those things. And my dad is a loving dad. All he did is like come home from work one day and something hit him the way he was raised too. And what do you know?
I do genuinely, I do see a shift in us. Like, it's primarily men I work with. I say 70-80% of my clients are men. But I definitely see a shift in men talking about love and feel love, or just this kind of shedding of this old idea of what a man was. And men, I would do a lot of men's groups, and men feeling safe enough to be vulnerable in front of other men and showing tears and telling other men that they love each other, and in a very caring and kind of, I would say, a very kind of mature and just
tender way.
It's definitely changing.
I know it's changing here. I know it's changing in Cork, because that's what I'm witnessing in men. Like, so this whole idea is kind of, it's dying a death. You know, but I grew up with John Wayne, and you know, he'd have a horse and you'd spit a little, and that was my idea of what a man was.
Right.
That's kind of dying a death now, where we're all on our own, walking around and getting up on the horse and you know, smoking a cigar or a rollie, and you know.
Mine was Bruce Lee or
different generation.
Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
You know, the wrestling I used to do. Yeah. But when you're talking about the male stuff, it got me thinking about something that I was struggling with for years. Was when I was having interactions with men, my life when a man was being nice to me, because I never had a male in influence. I had Brendan, my mother's partner, who was very good to me, but I never really had a male influence in my life growing up. And when I got into recovery and I was in the workforce, and like Donald and another one or two men that were really good to me, treated me with respect, it kind of fucked me up the smart of it, because I didn't understand it. I said, what's going on here? Like, is this normal? Because I felt a bit awkward, weary. In my head was kind of at me, but I finally understood that the reason I felt that way is because I had never actually any nice interactions or cared interactions with a man. It was like I was looking at him all as a father figure for me, and it was like, it was awkward for me. It was really, really awkward.
Unfamiliar.
Yeah.
And you didn't, I think, probably don't have the neural pathways, don't have the reference point for it inside of yourself, which is no fault of your own. And I think that we need to, just in the same way, like we were saying, it doesn't take but a small slight to actually have that pain, right? Whatever it is. On the flip side, it doesn't take just a little recognition to heal it either. It takes a lot longer. And one of my teachers said it takes 11 seconds to create a new neural pathway. So when we can recognize a moment like that where someone is saying something positive, if we can stay with it for 3 breaths and allow it to land. Yeah, I hear you breathing.
Blow it, sink in.
And feel your feet on the ground.
Instead of going straight into the head,
Instead of
Jesus Christ, messed up.
All that.
Or discounting it, or doing
Exactly. All of that is egoic. That's all responsive. We get it. But in some way be present enough to say, I'm just going to receive that.
Yeah. Allow
it to sink in. Sink in literally.
Yeah.
Susan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here with us.
It's been such an honor.
Is there any, do you want to mention a few things before we finish up?
Well, I'd like to thank all of our ambassadors who went before, who taught me everything I feel like I know about how to heal. And the work, if you want to find it, with EnneagramPrisonProject.org, and the classes are on thehumanpotentialist.com. And we can put those in the show notes, maybe.
We'll put them in the link in the bottom.
Okay, and the link in the bottom.
And the book, it's important to mention this book because it gives a great understanding.
It's our Bible, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. That's a great, great book. And if you want to take a test and know who you are, that's a really great first step. And you can do that on the PumaPotentialists.com website. We have a journey that starts there. That's our workbook in custody, and they can't get that one.
They can't?
Cannot, only if you're in custody.
Yeah.
And then we bring it to you for free.
Yeah.
And we really encourage people to recognize something that we know, and that it's not just difficult to do the work by ourselves. It's impossible. And that's a quote from Gurdjieff. So don't go it alone. Find a guide or someone that can come with you. And we have all kinds of courses that we always do in groups. We create individual journeys for people to explore their Enneagram type, and you can find that work on those 2 sites. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for allowing me into your work. It's really been my pleasure to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you here.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
It's my first podcast with Tim.
Oh.
And I'm absolutely just delighted it was with you.
Yeah.
Genuinely, it's been amazing. It really has. It felt great. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks. And thanks to Mary as well. Thanks for coming. And I met you today, and you're breath of fresh air, if you don't mind me saying so. So thanks, Susan. And listen, best of luck to everybody over on the programs in the prisons, and best of luck to you and your family and everything else.
Thank you. Well, we'll see you again on the inside 100%, or something, I think.
100 million%.
We're not going anywhere.
So listen, lads, thanks a million. This is Timmy from the Long Way Back podcast. Donald and Susan. Thanks again, and Slán. God bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.